Well, tonight we continue our budget preview series as the financial secretary explains the budget process just under 1 week from Parliament.
Highly anticipated announcement, how the approximately $1 billion to fund the fiscal year ahead will be allocated. Historically, health and education have accounted for the lion's share, but the fine details of the budget are a months-long, painstaking process.
And so that process starts in earnest really around February or March, where we'd issue out what's called a call circular to government agencies. And that's sort of to set the broad framework for the budget, to let them know what they can expect or what the parameters are as far as expenditure requests, the form we would want them to set in the broad parameters. And then agencies would then use that to base their submissions.
Those submissions provide the context for the next phase of the process, deciding what's priority and how to trim the fat.
We do a review, we compile them, and then we hold budget hearings. And what happens in the budget hearings is that the agencies then have an opportunity to come in and explain their budget. We challenge them sometimes. The budget analysts would sit down, would talk to them to get a feel for what's happening with their budget. We look for opportunities where they can scale back. We try to identify what we call required increases, meaning that there's a contract in place or there's some project ongoing, so we have to make sure those are funded.
We asked Financial Secretary Marlon Johnson about the features of the upcoming budget. In a guarded response, he said many of the priorities have been in the headlines for months.
It really have to be answered by the Deputy Prime Minister, but what I can say is that the government would have already articulated a medium-term fiscal plan, which sets the parameters for deficit targets and debt targets over the next 3 years. So what we do from a standpoint of the Ministry of Finance is we take the submissions and we look at what the government's priorities are, we look at what the fiscal targets are, and we provide the government with options what we believe can accommodate both what the policy priorities are and what the fiscal targets are. So the budget will be framed in the context of that overall.
Johnson says though the budget is largely a creature of policymakers, public input is a factor.
Throughout the year, we get representation from individuals, from civic groups, from industry representatives who provide the government with a number of ideas and suggestions. And certainly, I was a young budget analyst back in the 90s, I left government, but even coming back now, that feedback throughout all governments is taken into account because you get a lot of sound ideas. You get a good feedback as to what's working and what's not working. And so certainly the feedback from the public, from civic organizations, from industry associations, informs the recommendations we put forward to the policymakers.